Hey everyone, have you used Copilot yet? And of course, I'm talking specifically about Copilot for Microsoft 365. Now, of course, there's lots of different Copilots, but again, talking specifically about Copilot for Microsoft 365. Now, it's really good at surfacing information from within our M365 tenants. Of course, the problem this creates is maybe it's a little bit too good at surfacing information. So most organizations struggle to properly manage permissions for SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, Teams. And again, this kind of creates a problem, right? A nosy, malicious insider could find information quickly that they couldn't or shouldn't be able to. Not to mention a compromised user account. What if a threat actor got a hold of Copilot within your M365 tenant? So I've got Philip Galea on today, and we're talking specifically about this issue, kind of the ins and outs of it. What would the various vectors of attack look like? What do you need to look out for? And more importantly, what can you do about this issue? So I've got that and lots more in today's episode of the Security Swarm podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back for another episode of the Security Swarm podcast, the podcast that brings you the knowledge and insight straight from the security lab here at Hornet Security. As always, I'm your host, Andy Syrewicze, and I've got Philip Galea on with me today. How's it going, Phil?
Hi, Andy. I'm going well. How are you?
Doing good. Hey, we're talking about Copilot today, and I know you're in the process of, moving and everything, so I appreciate you taking the time to come on and share some of your insights with us. So it's always good having you on the show, my friend.
Thank you. No, it's a bit crazy at the moment. Shifting a home lab and making sure that everything keeps running, all of the IPs don't change.
Wait.
That's my biggest worry. It isn't
That's
like
your that's your biggest worry is making sure your static IPs stay the same. I got to back up here for a second. So you've got static IPs assigned to your home lab. The external IP, obviously, right? So
yeah. So I have
interesting.
that, and I'll figure that part out. Now I have all of my DNS records that I have to get sorted and make sure that I don't have any of my services pointing to each other using static IPs. So I have to go through them all and make sure I don't have some hard-coded config that
Right.
says use IP.
So on top of the usual I'm moving checklist, you've got lab related items too. This might be the first time I've ever heard of somebody having DNS checks and changes on their moving checklist.
So underwear, food, a mattress, DNS.
DNS. Well, that's a first for me. Well done. Anyway, so we're talking about Copilot today, and AI. Yes, I said it. There's the industry buzzword for the last year or two here, but Copilot, if you're not familiar, I can't imagine any of our listeners don't know what Copilot is. But just in case you've been living under a rock for the last year or two, Copilot is Microsoft's AI tool that they are putting in all the things, right? So they have several Copilots. They have Copilot for Microsoft 365, Security Copilot. There's Copilot Microsoft Azure. And then there's, of course, the freely available copilot.microsoft.com. Now, just like all security professionals have been doing over the last year or two, we've been trying to poke at this thing and break it and getting it to do things that it, probably shouldn't be doing, right? And so that's kind of what we wanted to talk about on this particular episode, right? And so I think it probably makes sense, Phil, for us to kind of start by talking about the problem that Copilot has created. And to just kind of set the stage here a little bit, we are going to focus on Copilot for Microsoft 365. So this is Copilot that it's essentially GPT-4 with access to your M365 dataset for your tenant, right? And that's kind of the basic description of it, right? And so really what Copilot has done here is it's created, I guess how I would describe it, as a data surfacing issue, nightmare. I don't know how I want to phrase it, but it makes it super easy for people to surface information, which is its job, right? It's designed to do that. Now, if you back up for a second, and I think you and I have talked about this on the show before, Phil, is that most organizations lack the operational maturity to adequately keep their arms wrapped around share permissions in SharePoint, folder permissions in SharePoint, sharing in OneDrive, um, not to mention Teams, because SharePoint underpins Teams. Teams has all of its own sharing stuff as well. And unless an organization is really, really working hard at keeping all that stuff under wraps, you end up with a rat's nest of permissions and things being shared.
Both. And it's funny you mentioned Teams and files and SharePoint, and I've been playing around a bit more. And like obviously files contain the bulk of your information,
Right.
but it's also your emails that you
Yep.
have access to in public folders, that you
Correct.
have access to in shared mailboxes. It's everyone's calendars. It's my planner. So recently I started using Microsoft Planner, and for example, since planners can be linked to groups,
Yep.
and planners exist in groups, and groups are public, I can now see some security labs. No, no, not the security labs, but some public groups in the company that didn't take any notice of like setting it to private. So now I can see their Kanbans. And I mean, you tell me you, Philip, can't understand that information or can't do anything with that information, but maybe not me, but maybe someone else, and maybe someone malicious. There's so much information that all you have to do is scratch the surface, and it's public to every employee.
Right.
It's not advertised, but if they really wanted to go around and use the search and like try and dig deep, it's public. And Copilot just adds a huge shortcut
Yep.
for employees to, yes, okay, understand better what their company is doing and summarize, but also your own employees and bad actors later on, and we'll get into it, but your own employees finding out stuff that maybe they shouldn't have access to.
Right.
So internal roadmaps and stuff like this.
Yep. Not to mention HR related information, right?
Yes.
And so,
So funny you mentioned that. As much as Copilot is geared towards me not being able to type in the word salary, because as soon as I type in the word salary and hit enter, Copilot just tells me, "I'm sorry, I can't talk about that topic. I have now closed it yet. Please start a new one." There are ways of getting around it.
yeah.
So yeah, I've been playing around with it a bit, and the word bonus works, the word raise works. If I'm using German words, because obviously like we have headquarters in Germany, we also have now like headquarters in France, and so those words aren't as protected.
Yep.
And it's pretty dangerous now. Like we're an organization, and like we're super tight with security, and now like with our own tools that we dog food like permission manager, we lock down access to the HR one. Definitely we lock down,
Right.
but not everyone has, as you said, not everyone has that security maturity
Yeah.
to go about and look at their entire surface and start locking down what needs to be locked down.
Exactly. And I mean, those organizations that are able to do that, they probably have a person that it's their job to go and make sure that all share permissions, access to information, all that stuff is right size. But if you're especially in the mid market and the SMB space, leadership tends to just leave that up to end users. And going back to the planner group discussion, that example, I mean, your standard M365 user is just gonna, hey, I need a planner for this project. I'm gonna go create it. They're
They
not
do.
going to, yeah, they're
They're not
not
going
gonna,
to read the
yeah,
options on the box. They're just going to go next, 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 next. Create a
exactly,
public group.
exactly. Because, and this is kind of uh, a long-standing, I don't want to say problem because it's kind of the design of it, but in my opinion, it's a problem. The default permissions for pretty much everything in 365 are
Yeah, yeah,
fairly open, which is a
yeah.
problem, right?
And that's true about not just the permissions, but about even Microsoft settings. So a lot of settings come out of the box on a tenant, not best practice. And nowadays, for example, Microsoft has been being better about them, but they don't retroactively fix those on existing tenants. So um, I failed to give you an example now, but I was just working on something for tenant management, which is a sharing setting in Exchange, which pre 2019 was disabled, and now it's enabled, and it protects. I think it's calendar sharing,
Right.
so public calendar sharing, and now it protects. Sorry, any tenant created post 2019, post September 2019, has this enabled by default. But everyone before that time still has this old insecure setting, and it's kind of, I don't want to throw them under the bus and put them in a bad light, but it's kind of like typical Microsoft where the defaults just aren't good enough. This is like when Teams first came out, and every single time you shared a file over Teams, it created an anonymous link, which is
Oh
just
yeah.
bad practice.
Yeah.
Like now they fixed it, but everything that was created pre last year was an anonymous link without an expiration, and these still exist. They weren't cleaned up.
And so I'm glad you mentioned this because, and again, I'm not bagging on Microsoft here. People that watch the show know I love Microsoft stuff. I'm a Microsoft MVP, don't get me wrong. But I'm sensing a trend here. So you mentioned that example, the team's anonymous link example, right? How about when they started linking teams externally? External communication was turned on by default.
Oh
Um,
yes,
go back to what's the other example I just thought of? I had it just a second ago and I lost it. Oh, it was
they
something to do
only.
with exchange online.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I lost it. Anyway, the other example I just thought of in kind of security lapses, missteps is recall. The whole debacle with Microsoft Recall recently. Um,
And they're
eh,
very reactive, so it's like, okay, so they come out with the feature, they come out with the settings, and then right after they're like, oh shit, because of the backlash, we're gonna fix it. So like you mentioned, the whole team's external communication, they only fixed it after
yep,
like malicious actors, as in hackers, started randomly contacting people on Teams and getting them to click on phishing links, and that whole ordeal with, I think it was a GIF. So hacker sends a GIF as an external message to a user inside Teams, and it was a no-click exploit.
yep. I remember
So
that one.
you're screwed. There was
I
no
remember
protection.
that was
And
a
as soon
bad
as
one.
and as soon as that hack came out, Microsoft is like, no, but it's really difficult for that to happen. And a couple of weeks later, they patched it and put in like a feature where by default you have to say, yes, I accept communication from this person that I don't know, and then it opens up the chat window. I remember the 2019 thing. Mailbox auditing by default was disabled pre-January 2019. So for all tenants that existed pre-January 2019, mailbox auditing is still off.
Right.
And mailbox auditing is obviously like really important for forensics when you get hacked, when something goes wrong.
Yep.
Like you get phished and someone's making rules on your mailbox. You need that information as a
For sure.
forensics team to go in and find out what they've done and what the impact is. And for all tenants that, as in, and ours was pre 2019, because we were very early adopters of M365. This is disabled by default on all users. So it's always kind of, we develop it without security in mind,
Correct. Yep.
and then see later. It's not only a Microsoft thing. Security as an afterthought is an
It's an
industry thing.
industry wide thing for sure. And I see this with Copilot as well, right? And so they've added, don't get me wrong, Copilot is great. It does really cool stuff, right? But
It's
the
helped me
security,
write some very nice emails, some very very nice polite emails. It's helped me write, and the draft with Copilot and Outlook is like amazing. It's like, so you sound a bit aggressive. Do you want to sound nice? I'm like, yes, yes, make me sound nicer.
So you can write the email, how you want to write it, and then
Yeah,
have Copilot nicify it, right?
yeah.
There's my made up word for the episode, nicify. Uh, anyway, so yeah, it does really cool stuff. But again, security is kind of the afterthought here, right? And um, even without jailbreaking, so folks that have listened to the show, they know we've talked about AI jailbreaking before. Jailbreaking is the practice of getting an AI to provide outputs that it shouldn't be providing, right? And
I was I was playing with that recently. So there's a Reddit post from a couple of months ago on someone managing to make Copilot regurgitate its prompts in
mm,
Teams. So you can find it on Reddit, and it's like the internal prompt that Copilot has for Teams. I must not talk about salary, and I must not talk about X, Y, and Z. And I tried to reverse engineer it a bit, and then I realized, like, okay, it's patched, because as soon as I tried
yeah,
using its prompts in reverse, it just bricked me out.
yep.
Um, but it's only a matter of time until someone gets it right, and it's a 0 day, and no one knows about it, and then it's jailbroken, and you get what you want, and I get HR's information.
Yep. And in my experience, and I'm speaking in generalities here, when I compare it to like GPT, Chat GPT and Gemini, I found that Copilot tends to be a little bit more difficult to jailbreak in my own experience. Now, if
It
folks
is.
have, sorry, go ahead, Phil.
No, no, yeah, no, you're definitely right. It is. And the fact that kind of, I'm not going to say it doesn't care so much about the user, but because the business is what is paying Microsoft, is who is paying Copilot, not the user, it doesn't mind breaking a chat there and then and blocking me out. So
Yeah,
let's say it's ChatGPT, and I'm trying to hack into ChatGPT, into their prompts. There's not a lot of data I can get out, and if it breaks, it's a bad user experience. So as much as possible, it's the user who's paying it at the end of the day. You want to give them a good experience.
right,
Teams Copilot, at least. I mean, I've tried some of the others, but I've only tried jailbreaking the Teams one. Teams doesn't care. As soon as I give it like a single word that it suspects I'm trying to do something bad, it'll shut it down. And this makes sense because, like, company data over a user's experience. So Microsoft
right.
has gone into the mentality more kind of protect the company and be helpful to the user. But at the end of the day, the goal is protect the company. But still, it's an AI, and it can dream, it can imagine, and if it can, then it can, yeah, be corrupted.
Right, right. So when we think about Copilot, then, we've kind of talked about the problem a little bit. We've talked about how it's more difficult to jailbreak. What I wanted to talk about is specifically um, some of the things that we've looked at from a security perspective when it comes to Copilot. The first example I'm thinking of is the case where you have, I guess I'm going to say it nicely, a nosy employee, somebody who's poking around for stuff that maybe they shouldn't be. Maybe they want to see, hey, did Bob get a raise last year? You kind of gave one of those examples earlier. Or the other one that I've seen brought up in the community recently is stalking behavior, right? So somebody wants, address information of a coworker or phone number or that type of stuff. I've seen a lot of concerns around Copilot in that area as well. And unless an organization is really locking down access to that information, when you have a nosy internal employee, I guess you could, in a way, call that an insider threat, right? I
Yeah.
mean, Copilot creates an additional security concern in that case.
Look, I'll give you a really easy example, and over here I might be like saying something that I shouldn't say, but I was poking around and trying to see, like, where our vulnerabilities are, where our holes are, and we're a company like any other, and kind of we do our own internal sort of vetting and put in place security measures, but it wasn't a long time ago where I found a public group that sales was using, that one of the internal sales team was using, with some customer details. So it was just, so this is where you tell me like, shut the hell up, Phil. Um, but but it was like customer feedback on certain features. So it's nothing that is super dangerous. It's like, we think it's great, or there's a bug over here, but it has an email address over there. So I'm thinking to myself, if I'm an employee who wants to jump ship, get a list of customers and take that along to a competitor, or start a new business. I asked Copilot to generate a list for me of
Right.
these customers, and it went about and gave me a nice collated list from a couple of Excel sheets that were in this public group, with who these people were, and what kind of customer they were. If they were an MSP, and this is dangerous. So especially like if it's someone who wants to jump ship and take certain company secrets, and maybe they're not so secret, but it's company information at the end of the day. So it's
Right. And
really
that's
scary from that point of view.
right. And that's the danger in that situation, right? Is
It
that's kind
makes
of an
it so easy.
yeah, that's an insider threat concern there. And just to confirm and just to clarify, when you say public group, this group was not accessible from the internet. It was accessible to internal employees. So I've made our
Yes,
lawyers happy now.
yes,
So
yes.
just to confirm, there was no external access to this information, but it's still an inside.
And
Sorry, go ahead.
and the only users who were in this public group were actually salespeople. So it's not like anyone found a public group and joined it from
Exactly.
inside our own company, like from support or from IT. No one
Right.
joined the public group. But still, Copilot can access that because it's a public group. And so if someone from IT wanted to get that information out easily, collate it in a nice spreadsheet, not go through the effort of looking for public groups in the Microsoft directory, which they
Right.
could have done anyway before.
Right.
Copilot just makes it like click of a button, one sentence. It lowers the barrier of entry by so much, and this is what kind of security is all about. It's um, protecting against the low hanging fruit. Because
Right.
if someone, this is with all security, if someone wants to get at you, it's only a matter of time and money.
Yep.
Um, uh, and the best you can do is just sort of continuously remove the low hanging fruits until you make it so difficult that people just give up, and
Right.
it's not worth their time.
Yep.
But Copilot has basically made a lot of things low hanging fruit now again.
For sure. For sure. So what we talked about so far generally amounts to an insider threat, like I said, right? The next area, and where my brain ultimately went when I first started looking at this issue a few months ago, is what if I'm a threat actor and I compromise an account that has a Copilot for 365 license? Like, I just struck gold, man. Like, like that's a gold mine for me. And so a lot of people be like, well, what are the chances of them compromising an MFA protected account? Um,
Hi.
Go take a look at adversary in the middle proxy toolkits like evilgenics. I'll link to a webinar where I actually demo credential theft with MFA enabled, using evilgenics. It is well, it's shockingly easy, I guess is how I'll say it. Shockingly easy. I'll link the webinar. I show that demo in the show notes, so take a look at that if you're interested. My point is, it's not that difficult for threat actors to gain access to a 365 account, right? And so, assuming that they do, and it has Copilot enabled, they can get up to all kinds of mischief to not only exfiltrate data. So many of the examples that you've given so far, Phil, right, is to exfiltrate, hey, what are some recent financial transactions that have occurred, or conversations that have happened in email, or what are some recent financial changes within the accounting department, or even maybe even more simpler than that, not necessarily related to financial stuff, but just something as simple as, hey, who are the executive leaders within the organization? So they get that information. Now they know who to use, impersonation attacks with,
Yeah,
things
yeah.
like that.
Basically a map of where I should laterally move.
Yep,
So it's like
exactly.
how. In what order should I escalate my privileges? If you can
Yep,
tell me sort of who I work with, who the IT guys are, who the IT guy that I'm most familiar with, and then I get access to his account because I start fishing him with the same language that kind of we always speak in Teams chats and emails, and Copilot can help me with all of this.
for
And then
sure.
I escalate to him, and then he escalates to someone in finance, and then finance escalates to someone in the executive side. So it just gives you a map of all of the users, their responsibilities, and also kind of the vulnerabilities that exist in the company, like trust.
Right.
Like I would be able to ask an IT guy, "Hey, can you please reset my password really quick? I don't feel like submitting a ticket," and they just do it. Uh,
Right. You know what this makes me think of? Um, if you've ever attended like a large event or like a large theme park here in the States anyway, when you go to park and their parking structures are huge. And in the morning, when everybody's starting to go to the theme park, right, usually have these people in the parking structure, with those orange batons, and they're like directing traffic. They're telling you where to go and where to park. I feel like if I'm a threat actor, the people with the batons are Copilot, right? Hey, go here, do this. Hey, go here, do this. That's kind of what it reminds me of. Anyway, um,
It is. I mean, this concept exists at the moment in the email security world with business email compromise,
yeah,
where I get access to your mailbox, and through it, I learn how to socially engineer a conversation so that I can say, "Hey, Gab, you remember we're working on this project? My boss." Adrian just approved the purchase of 500 Amazon gift cards. I swear, but he's really busy right now because he's in a conference in France, and all of that is real information.
yep,
And you can do it manually, like through the way it's done through BEC, through business email compromise, and kind of socially engineer that conversation with Gabby in finance. But now Copilot has just given BEC steroids.
right,
So I don't need to do all of that research and read 100 emails and kind of figure that stuff out. I can just ask Copilot, who is my
yep,
manager? Where are they right now? What projects are we working on? Who is the person in finance? And then I can craft that kind of attack.
right. Or the other example that I just thought of, and I think I think there was an episode I did with Roman Bassett where we talked about the current top spear phishing methods. Gift card fraud was the top method currently. And you mentioned gift cards. If I had Copilot and I had a compromised account as a threat actor, okay, go give me the list of all the sales professionals in the organization. Okay, who is the sales executive? Who's the VP of sales, right? Okay, now I'm going to craft a message using Copilot, pretending I'm the VP of sales, and hey, I need to give $100 gift cards for my top 20 sales performer. Here's the list of sales professionals. So now
Yeah,
the operations person receiving that impersonation attack, it looks like it's coming from the sales leader. Oh, these 20 people that they have listed are actual salespeople within the organization. And because it's gift card fraud, it's probably going to be a low enough amount to where it's
they're not
probably
gonna
not
care.
going to
They're
raise up
not gonna
on
ask
somebody's radar.
questions.
Yep. Yep, for sure. So, um, yeah. So it creates an entire new vector of attack in a way, right? And so that
Spear phishing on steroids.
you're right. Exactly. That's a good description. And it brings me now to, okay, what's Microsoft's recommendation? And like so many other things in our industry, we talked about how security industry wide, not just Microsoft, but industry wide is often an afterthought. What are their recommendations for solving this? And so far, I've seen two talked about by Microsoft, a lot. The first one is sensitivity labels, which are
Mhm.
contained in the DLP features inside of Purview. And if you've ever tried to use Purview, Purview is great, but like so many of the enterprise features in the Microsoft stack, they're designed for organizations that have a compliance team. They have a
Yeah,
whole
team
team that uses
based.
Purview.
Yeah.
And so, not only does Purview have to be set up and maintained and managed, the company, every user in the company needs to be trained on and know how to use sensitivity labels.
And
So,
it has to be enforced.
yep,
Continual training, because Microsoft changes the portals.
right.
Like I change my underwear about every week. I'm joking.
Oh boy. Oh boy. We just had an admission on the show here, folks, and that's a show first. Anyway,
Um, so you have to have continuous training, and sometimes users are lazy, sometimes users make mistakes, and sometimes management doesn't follow up and check that kind of all of the rules are being enforced. So yeah, it's a fantastic solution, but it comes with heavy overheads. Let's
right.
call it.
Definitely, it's a heavy lift from many organizations. The other thing that I've seen Microsoft talk about, and I feel like it's shooting yourself in the foot,
Yeah.
and
Uh, I,
their recommendation
I,
is
I,
right. It's turn off search for sensitive SharePoint sites. The problem with that is
you're
it
breaking the
breaks
site.
search. It
Yeah.
breaks search. You know, and so that to me that's not an option because I mean I feel like search in SharePoint is kind of one of those you just expect it to be there type of features, right?
I mean, not only, but can you imagine? So we have an HR site, and you'd say, as a company, this HR site should be excluded from all of Copilot because it contains a hell of a lot of sensitive employee confidential information. And you say, all right, let me exclude it completely from Copilot, thereby excluding it completely from Microsoft Search. Everyone in HR to find like a scrap of information, they have like thousands and tens of thousands of
Yeah.
files. How do you expect them to know? I mean, Microsoft doesn't even give you a tree view in SharePoint. So
Oh,
anyone needing to find that kind of information is literally doing it blindly, clicking folder. And unless like it's super duper structured, and even when it is super duper structured, it's not something that you can ask a department to do. Like, hey, okay, you have tens of thousands of files, you don't have a tree view, and now you don't have search. Good luck. Um,
right. And I guess
what do you do?
the only other way around that, and this is not a good
Download
idea.
them, download them locally.
Exactly. That's exactly where I was going. And that's why I was prefacing my statement with this is not a good idea. You don't want HR files living on endpoints, period. You know, so that's not even really a solution either. So I mean it's like, okay, I'm gonna try and fix the wound in my left foot by shooting myself in the right foot, you know? So it just
let's
anyway.
let's expand the attack surface by introducing 20 laptops that can be lost or hacked.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna fix the security issue by expanding our attack surface. That seems like a oh wow. Anyway, so I don't feel like there's a good solution natively for it right now, and I try not to plug our own products a whole lot on the show, but this is where I've seen people utilize our permission manager solution a lot. It doesn't solve every issue that we've talked about on the show, but it helps on the SharePoint, the OneDrive, and the team side of the conversation because our permission manager tool gives you a nice summary view of like, hey, this is shared by who, this is how it's shared. You can see the tree permissions in your SharePoint sites, and you can create policies using permission manager to say, hey, I want my SharePoint sites to look like this from a security perspective. And if it ever deviates, I want to know about it. Or my personal favorite, new-ish checkbox in the application. If a certain amount of time elapses and nobody's fixed this manually, just fix it, right? So that's one of my favorite new features. And I know permission manager's one of your babies, Phil. So I got to give you hats off to that particular checkbox, my friend. So anyway,
We have another baby that's going to be helping us for Copilot. I mean, we're releasing it now, and I think by the time this podcast comes out, hopefully, it will be released to the public. Or
it'll
maybe
be
I'm like,
close. It'll be
maybe,
close, but I think you'll be okay.
but we'll soon be coming out with Tenant Manager, and like sneak peek only for the listeners of the podcast. But Tenant Manager will help you manage all of your Entra policies and your conditional access policies, your Intune policies, and also Microsoft settings inside Microsoft. So kind of like take abstract all of the different Microsoft portals in which you'd have to toggle all of these boxes. And give you a nice template and a nice wizard to kind of say, okay, I want this, and this setting, and I want them to be applied to this tenant or even multiple tenants. So I can kind of create best practices and make sure that the tenant that was created in 2017 that had that option, and the tenant that was created in 2020 that had it enabled and best practice, well, they're both set to best practice. And this kind of bridges the gap as well with SharePoint permissions. So we have SharePoint permissions, but we also have like now Microsoft 365 settings and access through those. We're protecting for those.
Yeah, it's going to be really nice to have that. That's a great tool, and you know what it really reminds me of is there is, boy, I want to say old. I don't really think it's an old feature, but years and years ago, there was a lot of buzz in the industry about DSC on Windows Server, desired state configuration.
Yeah.
And DSC, the desired state configuration, basically says, and I have to quote a friend of mine, Jeff Hicks here. Jeff Hicks is a big PowerShell guy. And I love how he explains it in one of his videos. He says DSC has two different modes. The first mode is the the definition phase. What do I want? What do I want this to look like? And the second phase is, and he's quoting Jean-Luc Picard from Star Trek here, the make it so phase, right? And so I feel like Tenant Managers is very similar in that, hey, I want my M365 settings to look like this. Go do it, right? So anyway, that's just what it makes
Yeah.
me think of.
Yeah, it's exactly that. But it comes with the what did you call it? Your favorite special new feature in Permission Manager. It comes with the same kind of feature, the auto remediate.
Yep,
So
exactly.
automatically fix. So if you wanted to automatically fix any of those settings that have been changed by your admins, even sometimes users with escalated privileges, well, it
Yep,
can go about, warn you about them, and set them back. So that's one really important thing that needs to exist in any product that kind of has to take care of real world scenarios, because in a real world you need to sometimes toggle off setting or give
yep,
access in SharePoint to a third party, because for this particular file and in this particular use case and this scenario it needs to happen. But then straight away, right after, it doesn't need to be there, it should be fixed. And that's
right.
and that's one big security low hanging fruit. When you do these changes that are needed, but then you forget about them. It's all about enforcement.
Yep, yep, for sure. So, well, Phil, I think we've covered this pretty well, and we're about out of time. But I'll have to have you back on. We'll have you back on at some point to talk about this type of stuff again, I'm sure. But good spending some time with you, my friend, as always.
Yes, amazing. I enjoy talking to you as always, and hopefully we'll do it soon again.
For sure.
In the meantime, I'll continue with the moving
Yeah,
of the
that's
IP.
right. That's right. Well, next time we have you on the show, I'm going to ask you if your DNS changes went according to plan. So we'll
No,
see. Well,
no.
folks
They
listening,
never
we'll
know.
follow. Folks listening, we'll follow up on Phil's DNS changes the next time we have him on. So, anyway, always good having you. So, and those of you watching/listening, hopefully you found some value in today's episode. If so, be sure to smash that like and subscribe button if you're watching on the YouTubes. Otherwise, we're available on all the major podcasting platforms. With that, we'll let you get back to your day. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you again next week for another episode of the Security Swarm podcast. Have a good one.